Heyo, Bladman here. How you guys doing? So I made a video, and this is the second part of it, which is talking about violence. When is it justified? Should you attack first, ask questions later? Yada yada yada. And I made too many generalities and too much specifics about Russia and what have you. And frankly, it's a very complicated subject. So I figured I'd simplify it. And I apologize if I need to make a part 3 of this if it's not clear enough. There's general principles involved in humankind. Some of them derive from religious stuff, like Christianity and whatnot. And some of them are just kind of developed over time, and I'm sure people would attribute it to, oh, it's because of this religious thing or it's because of this specific thing. Okay, 6 of one, half dozen the other. It was developed over time that, like, hey, this works, this doesn't, so on and so forth. So the simple concept of it is you protect one another. You protect yourself, those you care about, and it expands onwards. And I've already gone over this, but the simplicity is life works this way. This is you, right? And then your family, and then a group of people going all around, and so on and so forth. And it expands after, like, your groups. There gets into, like, your the area that you live. So a big group. And then a bigger group would be like the state or the county or the whatever. At some point you get to a point where humankind is involved, okay? Now, I think that personally each person is responsible to maintain the security and welfare and stability of each other. Now, that's a responsibility, meaning, like, you don't have to do stuff. If I see a homeless person, I don't have to give them my car and this, that, and the other thing, okay? However, they're still a human being. They made choices, and if they're homeless, they probably made a lot of bad choices. But I still have a responsibility to them and their well-being. How much I do is kind of dependent on you, and so on and so forth. I'm not trying to be bleeding hard about it, but I'm just trying to say, hey, there are people who made really bad choices, and that's a whole other conversation which I'd love to get into about whether or not to help them or not, and what is the right version of help. But specifically what we're talking about is violence. When is it okay for you to initiate violence? And I would simply say that if you feel, if a third entity, so if there's you, there's one, right? And if there's another entity that is causing harm to you and yours, then you have a right, or there is a, I would justify it and say, like, a realistic expectation of harm, meaning somebody pulls a knife during a confrontation or a gun, or, like, you really feel like they're going to attack. Yeah, if I felt like somebody was going to attack my family, my wife, or my friends for that matter, then I would probably initiate the assault. Now, would I get assault charges later? Probably, depending on the person. But I think that I would feel okay with that. Meaning, if I felt like that person's next action was most probably going to be violence and could negatively impact the things I care about, yeah, I think that's justified to cause, to make proactive action. Now, if it gets out of, like, my immediate sphere, and now we have a group, okay, that I'm a part of, or even observing, okay, and this is an interesting phenomena. Like, okay, let's say you witness a bank robbery. I like using this analogy. It's a decent analogy. I feel like human beings in general should be expected to call the authorities, minimally report it to the authorities as soon as humanly possible. ASAP. as soon as humanly possible. Meaning not when they thought it was convenient and not when the cops showed up, but like call right the F now. Okay? That is minimum. Now, I think it would be good if you saw a bank robbery happen and you're in your car to go and like drive into the getaway car. They're going to have a really hard time getting away if their car's effed up. And I'm pretty sure you can make a good argument with your insurance company. Probably not because they're assholes, but you know, whatever. That $1,000 deductible is worth it. Maybe talk to your local authorities and maybe they'll comp you. Now, that's kind of weird violence. But on the same token, ultimately, if we're going back to this thing, you need to protect yourself, the people close to you. You need to protect yourself. So that goes both ways. If you're going to do something and there's a likelihood of you dying, and then everyone else will die, then that's probably not the right thing. You need to be smart about it. There's a likelihood of you doing something, and it, even if you might die, it could possibly, you got to make that choice. That's up to you. So simply put, yes, I think you should, fire once fired upon or attack once you're attacked. Self-defense is the most optimum thing. Or I guess the most optimum is just peaceful solution. Second would be don't fire till fired upon. But there are situations that I think that most people would universally agree. Well, that's a bit of an oxymoron. That's a bit of an oxymoron. Most people universally agree. What the F? Anyways, but I feel like you can feel confident that like, hey, I'm doing this. I feel justified and right by it. I'm going to do this. And I think a lot of people will be back your play. That being said, when you get into countries, it's very, very weird because no country is innocent. And yet, if you know of things like, and here's a question for you. Simply put, World War II, if countries knew that Germany was doing what Germany did to Jewish people, and blacks, and gypsies, and all these other groups, and had been doing for a while. Now, I think a lot of people would say we should go and attack Germany right now. And granted, they didn't really start doing this, to my knowledge, until like the start of the war. So war was already initiated, and Britain was kind of helping support France, but not really involved, and France was really just defending themselves. But there's all these other countries around there. And I think it was a couple countries that were neutral. So to me, I feel like if it was known, hey, this country, the people at the top have okayed this stuff, which affects a group of people and is gross and atrocious and horrible. Okay? Not just like, oh, we're taking over countries, because that's one part of what Germany did, which is declaring war, and that's not ideal. That's not good, right? But the human atrocity. So declaring war is one level of bad, okay? But the human atrocity of rounding up people, taking them to work camps, forcing them in labor. And I'm not talking about like POWs, because that's one thing. But like forcing them to do labor and then gassing them, killing them, so on and so forth. If there's a country that is doing that, and it's widely known, then in my opinion, that country, the people at the top who are making that decision, those people need to be removed from power because they're criminals. If a human being was doing that, like if I captured a person and held them in my house and was doing horrible things to them, I would be a criminal in my country and in every other country in the world. So therefore, it is not okay, generally speaking, for a country to be doing the same thing. And again, I'm going to hammer home on this. China is doing this, has been doing this with the Uyghur Muslims for a long, long time. And the reason I think that the world is kind of just like, oh, I don't see any bad things, is because China does create so many things on the cheap. And I think, frankly, if I knew that there was a person who basically had horrible, was doing a horrible thing, had horrible things in their house, their home, their private residence, and the community was like, yeah, but he gives us all cookies, or, he's just so helpful with handyman work, or whatever it is, I would feel obligated. And I talked to my wife about it first, but I would feel obligated to go and confront that person. If the authorities weren't willing to do anything, I personally would feel obligated. And I feel that should be the basic rule is, you know what? I'm gonna wrap this in a nice bow. Do to others what you would like done to you. And reversely, if you would not want it done to you and that's not something you would do, then don't do it to others. That's it for today. I'm sorry. I'm just going to leave you with that. I mean, war is bad, but capturing and perverting and torturing human beings is a different scale of bad. And as bad as war is, that is just a general two people fighting. But when one person is basically capturing, imprisoning, and torturing another group, to me, that is atrocious. And we as people should ultimately say no. So, love you all. Plaidman out for now. This is just part 2. If you want another part 3, let me know. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Plaidman out.